Hi, my name is Dr. Christine Harrington, and I'm delighted to talk to you today about how faculty can promote academic integrity. So basically, we're going to focus on the faculty role in helping students be academically honest. So first, let's take a moment to define academic integrity. Individuals who uphold academic integrity are honest and responsible when they're engaged in academic activities. This results in the creation of academic products that extend beyond prior contributions while giving proper credit to those whose ideas shaped or influenced the current work. Now, many of you probably are not surprised, unfortunately, by these alarming statistics. You can see here from this pie chart and this quote that more than 2/3 of college students have acknowledged engaging in some type of academic dishonest action previously. So this is kind of a widespread problem. And it really happens across the years. It seems to be that students who cheat in the K-12 environment are more likely to cheat in college, and those who cheat in college are more likely to cheat in graduate school and beyond. So it is very much a issue where once you start to engage in these behaviors, it does continue, or at least it's more likely to continue. It also is an international problem. So these researchers below, Bernardi et al., have really emphasized how this is not just unique to one country, but it's really happening in many different cultural situations. So let's take a moment to look at and explore the issue of who is cheating. Well, there are higher levels of cheating across lots of different individual factors. Let's start off with folks who have lower levels of religious beliefs and higher levels of entitlement, so they're more likely to cheat. Younger students are also more likely to cheat, and students who are more involved in clubs, especially fraternity, sorority type clubs and athletics, or if they're caring for children or parents. So they might just kind of be stretched a little bit thinner, and that can certainly be a part of the reason for the cheating. The other issue seems to be having to do with grades, and it seems that either the high-performing students who are trying to thrive and maybe get into a grad school, get a little extra competitive edge, or the lower students who are just trying to pass are more likely to cheat than folks in the middle ground. So those are some of the individual variables that seem to contribute to whether or not students will engage in cheating. Interestingly enough, Kidwell and Kent found that students who are in internet or distance education type courses actually reported lower levels of cheating as compared to traditional students. I know a lot of online instructors are very concerned about cheating, and there's significant conversation surrounding that, but the evidence isn't really showing that the cheating is happening at a more higher level in this environment. So it seems like we really need to kind of just tackle this from a broader perspective. So let's talk a minute now about why students cheat. Well, first of all, there is a lot of pressure for them to perform well, and in many cases, it's high-stakes kinds of issues. You might need grades to maintain a scholarship, to stay on an athletic team, to be able to get into grad school, things like that. Another reason for it is the perception that they believe that everyone else is doing it. So if you think everyone else is cheating, you're going to be more likely to cheat yourself. So it's kind of like the norm. There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody else is doing it, right? So the other one has to do with the lack of consequences. Unfortunately, many of us in the world of academia are not taking the actions necessary to really address this problem. And that word gets out to students pretty quickly. So you can cheat and get, maybe a little slap on the wrist, and it's not going to impact you too much. So we're really sending the message that, it's not that terrible to cheat. There really are no significant consequences. Now, we looked at why students do cheat. Let's also look at some of the literature that speaks to why students do not cheat. Well, one of the primary reasons for them not cheating has to do with what kind of goal they have. And students who have learning-based goals are much less likely to cheat. And that makes sense because cheating is not going to help them achieve that goal. If their goal simply is to have a good grade, then cheating may actually help them do well if they're not caught in a course. So it's really important. One of the most important things that we can focus on is really helping students focus on learning goals. The next one that has, kind of some really interesting research behind it is based on character. And we're going to go over that study in a moment. But basically, students don't want to be viewed as a cheater. So that can certainly impact the likelihood or reduce, the likelihood of them engaging in cheating behaviors. Students who think it's morally wrong are also less likely to cheat, and students who think that there will be strong consequences are also more likely to avoid dishonest behavior. Now we're going to take a closer look at that study that has to do with the character. So in this really interesting study by Brian Adams and Monin, what they did was they compared two different groups of students. And prior to taking the test, these two different students were told two different messages. And it was an experimental study, so folks were randomly assigned to one of the two conditions. And in the first condition, they were basically told, please don't cheat. And in the second condition, they were told, please don't be a cheater. So this is obviously more about the character of who you are. This is more specific action. And what they found was that the students who were told, please don't be a cheater, were much less likely to actually cheat on the academic task. So now we've explored some individual factors, and they are important to look at. However, it's really essential that you understand how powerful the situational or contextual variables really can be in making a decision about whether a student is going to cheat. In fact, these variables often contribute to cheating more so than individual factors. So we have to explore these situational variables now. So let's take some lessons learned from the world of social psychology, because these really illustrate very clearly the power of a situation. So you probably recall from your days, in either as an undergrad or a graduate student, looking at Milgram's famous obedience study. And actually the results of this study have been shown to be true as recently as 2009. So we can't really say, well, people today wouldn't act that way, because actually the research says yes, they would. And what this famous study really was, if you recall, is that they were instructed by an experimenter to administer these electric shocks to another participant in the study whenever they got an answer wrong on a test. Now, they weren't actually giving the shocks out. However, they did not know that. So the participant in the study was actually administering very high levels of electric shocks to a person for getting faulty answers, even when that person was screaming, please stop, I have a heart condition, I just want to get out of this. And they did that because the situation really warranted it. The experimenter was in the room and was saying, you must go on. And by just giving a couple of nudges in that direction, almost all of the participants really did engage in the actions that were requested. So this is something that obviously is not an ethical study. We really have to be very cautious about the way in which we would do that research today. But it really does speak to the fact of how valuable this kind of literature is, because it speaks to the power of the situation. And people who are, good, well-intentioned, nice human beings end up doing things that are not consistent with their view of who they are when placed in a situation that kind of dictates that. Ash's conformity study is also another example of that. And this was basically that study, if you recall, that had like lines, and all the lines were the same size except for a couple, and the participants had to decide which one was the same, that looked the same. So they had one line on the left and 3 lines on the right. And they had to say which one was the same. Well, what they did was they had a bunch of Confederates in the study so that everyone would give the wrong answer, the obvious wrong answer. So it was a line that didn't even look close to the line on the left. So by the time it gets to the person who is not in on the study, but is really just truly a participant, they end up just going ahead and going with the norm, because they think something must be wrong with them, so I must just go ahead and do what everyone else is doing. So even if they think that the others are wrong, they're still going to put their actions to be consistent with how others act. And that's what we learned from that study. One more study we'll go over is the Zimbardo's prison experimental study. And if you recall from this study, folks who participated were either assigned to be a prisoner or a guard. And what we learned very quickly was that people will, very soon after being given these roles, start to act their role. So regardless, 2 minutes beforehand, we were all just participants. Now I'm a guard. I'm going to act like a guard. I'm a prisoner. I'm going to act like a prisoner. So again, these studies, you take them together and you really see the power of the social situation. And if you go back, many of us would say, well, we wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. And the truth is, yes, we probably would. It's easy for us to say that when we're not in that situation, but the research is very clear, and there's been a ton of literature really on this topic, that the power of the situation is huge. So we need to keep that in mind, because these are powerful situational and contextual variables that can impact whether or not students will cheat in the college environment. So basically, students are less likely to cheat if they think their peers are not going to approve of it. So this peer group piece is a very important element. And if they think their peers are generally acting honest, then they're more likely to act honest also. And they also would be less likely to cheat if they think that their college is committed to, a sense of academic integrity and highly values this. So these are some of the situational variables that will impact the cheating. Bisping, Patron, and Ross Kelly found that students are less likely to cheat if they think that there's a good chance of them being caught. So obviously, if a professor is sitting up in the front of the room and just kind of head down, grading papers, checking emails, not looking around, not moving around, the student's going to feel like I can probably get away with cheating versus a faculty member who is constantly making eye contact, maybe even getting up and walking around the room. So the role of punishment also does impact our actions. Now, let's talk a minute about how we respond to cheating. First of all, I don't think any of us enjoy this part of our job. We don't really want to do the gotcha, I caught you, and have to do the confrontation and deal with determining what the best consequence is, etc. And unfortunately, many of us don't even follow the campus procedures. We often handle it ourselves, so it's often not making it up the chain of command, not getting filed as an official code of conduct. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Sometimes we don't feel like getting involved. It's just kind of a lot of paperwork that's involved in that. You may, think that students are going to give you bad ratings then. I may rate my professors or things like that. And you may also not believe that the administration is going to take the action seriously. So even if you do report it, maybe you think it won't actually be, addressed in the way that you want it to be addressed. So, and sometimes faculty will even kind of look the other way and pretend they didn't see it because, again, dealing with this it's not easy. It's very complicated and it takes a lot of mental energy as well as time to deal with it. All right, so now it's time for us to take a look at better solutions and what we can do to really try to increase the focus on academic integrity in our college atmospheres. All right, well, one of the most powerful kind of pieces of research out there is that schools who have honor codes actually seem to have less cheating reported than schools without honor codes. Now, even with the honor codes, it is not, non-existent. So you can see here from the chart, and there's several different studies here, that we're still seeing cheating happening. So we're not talking about it being eliminated, but it is reduced in schools with honor codes. So what is an honor code exactly? Well, here's what Menendez talks about when he describes the honor code. It's basically exams that are not proctored. In the beginning of their time at college, they're committing to some kind of statement that they will not cheat, and that's usually through some type of written pledge. And there's some kind of judicial process, and that process involves students, so it's not just administration and faculty. And students are expected to report any dishonest actions that they discover. So let's talk about what we can do in our own classrooms. Well, by teaching students about academic integrity, we can reduce especially the unintentional dishonest actions. Because let's face it, many of our students engage in these actions and really did not do so intentionally, but just did not fully understand what cheating and plagiarism was. So one of the actions we can take is to teach them about it. And here's an interesting study by Belter and Dupre that was done where they basically had their students complete this online module, something similar to this. Actually, I have a student version of this module. Also, this is for faculty, obviously. And in that module, they learned about what cheating, what plagiarism was, what kind of consequences might happen. And then they had to take a quiz. And they had as many chances as they wanted to on the quiz, but they had to get 100% before they were allowed to submit assignments. And what they discovered is that they compared this class to a previous class, and they wanted to look at the rates of plagiarism. So they had to do these, this assignment. It was an abnormal psychology class, and when they used the assignment, the professor used the Turnitin technology to determine or detect plagiarism, rather. And what they discovered in terms of results was that the class who used the module had much fewer, plagiarism incidents than the students who did not do the module the year prior. Now, obviously, it's not a purely experimental study because we're, doing some, kind of real life work in the world of college classes. However, this is a pretty significant drop in the number of plagiarism incidents. So it seems like a time well invested, and because it all happened outside of class, it wasn't a waste of class time, although talking about academic integrity is probably not a waste of class time. It's a good conversation to have. So in addition to teaching them and maybe having them do a module, you also want to create a climate of academic integrity. So by the way that you conduct yourself and some of the things that you say can really make a difference. So if you emphasize the importance of honest actions and why they're so critical to not only you as a faculty member, but really the institution. We don't want to be in a place where we get a bad rap and folks are thinking that our graduates are, dishonest. I mean, that really brings down, the experience for everyone. So we want it to be a valuable experience for all, and we can have conversations about that will help our students really understand the value and how much it really matters to us. One of the other things we can do, as I mentioned before, learning goals are, students with learning goals are much less likely to cheat. So we want to emphasize that with our students. We want to, obviously achievement matters and we don't want to act like it doesn't, but what we want to do is more heavily emphasize the value of learning. So we can do that in the syllabus, we can do that in class. So if we really emphasize how they are learning and how this content and knowledge and skill development is going to help them in the future, that will also reduce the likelihood of, dishonest actions. Now, when we talk about the next steps, what we're trying to do is we're also helping them see, when you're ethical and honest, this is going to carry you far in the world of work. And, that's one of the, most important characteristics that employers are looking for. They don't want to have employees who might engage in dishonest actions. That can get a company in a lot of trouble. And, really, that's going to be at the core value system at most, places of employment. So we want to talk about the importance of that now and how that really sets the stage for the future as well. The other thing we can do is be strategic as we create assignments. So, if we keep using the same assignment every semester, the chances of cheating and plagiarism is going to go up because there's going to be more versions of that paper out there. That can certainly, just be a little too tempting sometimes for even students who may not initially, want to cheat. The other thing is we might want to provide the paper topics so that way they can't just go and pick one that's available on one of those, websites that, kind of write papers for you, etc. And the more specific a topic is, the less likely it is for them to find a pre-made paper. So that's something else that I would suggest that you do is to try to narrow your projects to be a little bit more targeted towards whatever your goal is. If you ask students to attach the sources, that may also reduce the likelihood of plagiarism because they know that it's very easy for you to detect if it's right there in front of you. Seems like some briefer papers and maybe even alternatives to papers such as multimedia presentations might be some other avenues that may reduce plagiarism as well. So if you want to, you can go off to these websites, and here are some other examples about how you can create assignments that will promote academic integrity. So those are a couple of tools that are available to you. When it comes to testing, there are several things that we can do as a faculty member. The most important one is really to prepare our students well. So if we teach them well so that they really learn the content, they will be less likely to cheat because they're going to be more confident in their, knowing of the content that they need to know for the exam. There are obviously some strategies by not letting them have their cell phones or personal belongings near them, the way the seating is arranged, maybe having multiple formats. Not using the same exams over and over again, that obviously increases the likelihood of exams getting out there. And by using more open-ended questions, that is also more difficult to cheat on than obviously the multiple choice. You can't just peek over your shoulder and see somebody else who's circled the letter B. You have to actually, have the content to really describe the answer well. I think it's important for us to recognize that tests are not the only way to assess, and sometimes there's an over-reliance on tests, and it seems like tests probably have a higher incidence of cheating than maybe perhaps other kinds of assignments and projects. So that's kind of important to do as well. Avoiding the high-stakes tests is another strategy because the higher the stakes, the more the likelihood of cheating is. When you know you have to do well on this, or you may not pass the class, or you may lose your A, you've been working hard all semester, and now this final can be a make it or break it for you. Again, even students who are well-intentioned may feel very, very tempted to cheat because they, have this goal in mind, and it may be a grade-related goal. This study by Shu and colleagues had demonstrated that if you actually have them sign their name at the top, it reduces the cheating also. And again, before you give out the test, just remind them how important academic integrity is. You don't need to give them a 20-minute lesson on it, but just a statement or two about it can also just keep them on track. Now, in the online world, we certainly want to also promote the academic integrity. And again, I think it's a good idea to not have a high stakes assessment. You want to have several low to moderate stakes. So maybe you use a lot of more quizzing versus, heftier tests. And you may want to think about other assessment options as well. Decide what kind of parameters you want to set up. Many of the online testing situations allow you to put time limits, allow you to randomize the questions or the answers, all those kinds of variables that can kind of reduce the likelihood or reduce the temptation of students cheating on tests. And some faculty like to have them come in person to take the test where it's proctored, and that certainly is an option as well at many schools, not all, depending on how far away students are, but sometimes there's other testing locations that they can go to locally to have a proctored exam experience. Now, in terms of consequences, we do have to take action. If we see dishonest actions, it's our obligation as a faculty member to take action and to address those concerns. So we can't just kind of look the other way. That's not really appropriate, and it depends on the nature of the, dishonest action, I guess, in terms of the nature of the consequence. But we should be talking to our colleagues, our chairpersons, our deans perhaps, about this. And, in many cases, we'll need to also file code of conduct charges so that there's official notification on file. So here's a list of references that you may find helpful. They're the ones that I've been talking about throughout the presentation. I hope that you found this tutorial to be useful to you as you think about ways to promote academic integrity in your classroom. Thanks.